Hey, what's going on, everybody? Well, it's that time again. It's time to discuss some Star Wars, and this time, looks like The Mandalorian might actually be changing its name. And I'm not talking about an episode, I'm not talking about the character, I'm talking about the whole series. We're going to talk about it right now.
You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
Hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. So this is kind of cool. I'm actually trying out a new little audio device so far that's I think is actually improving things somewhat. Although unfortunately it's not mine. I'm just sort of trying it out, but this is great. I got like fans going and all this stuff, but the noise reduction is not doing too bad of a job. But anyway, we're not here to talk about audio devices. We're here to talk about Star Wars. So
Yes, sir.
when you actually heard this whole thing about them possibly changing the name, what were you thinking?
Well, first of all, I want to give credit to where credit is due. This particular story came to me from one of our faithful listeners, Dwight. Dwight Terrence supplied me with this story. He's like, "Hey, man, have you heard about this?" And I said, "No." And so, this is why we love doing this show, because we love when you guys participate. You give us stories, we give you guys news. It's a big community, and this is why we do it every Monday and Friday. Anyway, back to your original question. My, what did I think when I first heard this? I was kind of confused, honestly. I'm like, why would you change the name? I mean, first of all, it's a cool name. The Mandalorian, like, it has a cool sounding name to it anyway. And then I started thinking, well, what are you going to change it to then? If that's the case, So that was my first initial thoughts on it, before I even really delved into the story. Just off the title, that I saw at the beginning, I'm like, okay, well, what's wrong with the Mandalorian? And then what are you going to change it to if you do change it? So, yeah. What about you?
Well, I mean, I was thinking the same thing, right? At first, once you actually brought this to my attention, I started looking at anything that I can find on it. And I was really confused because it's ironic. Last Monday, a week ago today, we were talking about season 3 possibly being the last season of the show.
Right.
And now it looks like that could be true from a certain point of view.
Ah.
And that's where maybe those rumors came from that. Maybe this is pretty much what they were talking about when they said that it was last season, because if season 3 is the last season where they actually call the show The Mandalorian, well, then there you go, right?
Right.
If they call it Mandalore or they call it some other thing that's related, well, then it almost kicks off another show. So it really makes me wonder, well, what are they going to do?
Yeah, I mean, even if you do change the name from, let's say, the Mandalorian to Mandalore, everybody's kind of like, one, it's kind of a gutsy move from a marketing standpoint.
Oh, completely.
I mean, because you kind of hype this thing up as the Mandalorian, and then you got T-shirts out, you got, action figures, you got lunch boxes, you got all this other, paraphernalia out here that says the Mandalorian and things like that. And that's kind of how everybody knows the show. If you change it to Mandalore now, it's, although you're still dealing with the same characters and things like that, what is so significant? I mean, I get it. Maybe this is where the story is going to start taking place, but I don't see it as that being that critical to change the name of the title of the show.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that I'm with you on that one, because from a marketing standpoint, this just seems completely backwards. I mean, just look at this. Well, actually, it's this way. Look at that. You got the Mandalorian, you got this whole imagery going. I mean, it's really cool. Like you said, we've had 2, soon to be 3 seasons of this. So, I mean, and to change it now, it would make more sense for them to just end the show and then create another show, season 1 of something that's brand new, and say, okay, here's our new show. It's going to be the further adventures, I guess you could say, of these characters.
Yeah, I mean, but once again, I just feel like you just continue the stupid show. You know, I mean, I don't understand why we're doing this. You know, it doesn't seem that relevant or that serious that you would need to do that. Um, like I said, I think once again, like from a marketing standpoint, I think you have a lot of merchandise. You have a lot of things that's kind of already out there. You know, like I said, T-shirts, lunch boxes, and all types of things. I mean, and even taking Baby Yoda, right? Everybody was calling Grogu Baby Yoda. We all did because he didn't have a name. So okay, but now that we have a name for him, they're trying to keep saying Grogu. Even you know, um, Ahsoka even did it on the show, which I thought was hilarious because he's like, "Hey kid," and she's like, "Grogu," So it was kind of like a thing where it's like, yes, call him Grogu now, you know. But yeah, I just think that the name is cool. It has a cool logo. It totally fits the show. But I guess maybe if they're actually taking this story away from him and it's not going to be so much centered on him, that would make sense to me. That would be the only way it would make sense. And like he's still a focal character on the show, but see now that we have Moff Gideon, now we have Bo-Katan, now we have whoever else may pop up on this, particular series. And like I said, we don't know what's going to happen at the end of season 3 of The Mandalorian. Now, what we've heard was that, because we're still waiting on this whole lightsaber duel that Moff Gideon or Giancarlo Esposito, promised us. We're still waiting on that whole thing. So maybe, just maybe, at the end of all this, it does require a shift or a name change because of how season 3 ends. It would make the most sense.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, even if this whole thing plays out, first of all, what we know about season 3 right now, we know that it's going to start filming this month, I think, actually. And we know that obviously there's going to be certain things like it's going to cross the Book of Boba Fett storyline. So we know that there's some things going on.
As well as Ahsoka, too.
As Ahsoka. Ahsoka's the other one, exactly. So it's going to basically cross those two series, meaning that, like you said, we could actually see a focal shift from Din's character to maybe somebody else. We also saw the poster. Now, I'm not really sure. I mean, it seemed like it was legit, and I actually think it was a real Lucasfilm poster where you saw Luke and Grogu on the thing. And it's like, well, why are they on there as an advertisement for season 3? It's like, I mean, I think I brought this up on last week's show. I said, this is really odd that they're using that in the marketing, because that tells me anyway that there might actually be this entire shift. It's not going to go where we thought it was going to go.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, if you're going to focus on, because, when we last left our characters, in season 2, Din had the Darksaber. We kind of brought this up on our last show, but just a kind of a brief recap. Din has the Darksaber, which makes him the rightful ruler of Mandalore, or whatever, they choose to make the new Mandalore or whatever, which Bo-Katan wants. Now, from what I'm hearing is that Bo-Katan's character is going to kind of give us a bit of a shift where we don't know if she's going to be a villain or a hero. Like, she skims the edge a little bit, almost kind of like how Maul was in Rebels. I've been kind of getting back into that again and kind of following some of these episodes because it kind of refreshes my mind on some other things, but especially leading up to the Ahsoka series. But looking at the landscape of what season 3 could possibly give us, I could see it being changed to Mandalore, because now instead of just focusing on one person, the Mandalorian and his adventures, now we're focusing on the new Mandalore thing and all the things that's going on with that. So that means Moff Gideon, that means the politics, that means Bo-Katan, that means whoever else is going to pop up in that particular series. The focus is now, and we talked about this. You and I talked about this at the very onset of the show, The Mandalorian. We said, like, okay, you can't bring too many different, like you can't bring the Jedi, or if you bring the Jedi in there, it could kind of take the center or the focus off the character, which is titled The Mandalorian. So now maybe that is the reason, or that is the rationale, is because now the focus is intentionally, and that's the key word, intentionally shifting from the Mandalorian to maybe something greater like Mandalore, versus it kind of, the Mandalorian just gets convoluted with a bunch of other stuff, and then now it's kind of like not focusing on him anymore.
Well, okay, so I'll get to this in a sec, but first
We'll
let
get
me
to the
get your
airman in a minute.
exactly. Let's get to this first, because to that point that you just made, how
Mhm.
intentional do you think it is, though? So, in other words, how far back do you think? Because they would have had to plan something like this at least at the beginning of season 2, if not even when they were doing season 1. If they said, okay, and we always said that too, right? When any new show comes out in the Star Wars universe, we always
Mhm.
say, well, how many seasons is this thing going to go? And
Mhm.
even when we were doing our Bad Batch review, we were always speculating, well, it really depends. We're only an episode or 2 into the season. We really don't know where the story's going to go. And then as time moved on, we started saying things like, well, it really depends. There's certain criticisms or certain things that you want to say about it, but you really can't, because you don't know where the story is going to go. You don't know how many seasons are going to be in this particular story arc. So it's really hard to gauge a lot of that stuff. So my question for
Yeah.
you would be, how intentional, you said, well, maybe this is an intentional thing, which it would almost have to be. I don't think
Mhm.
they just started saying at the end of season 2, like, maybe we should just do one more of these and kind of call it and change the name. Now, hey, who knows? Maybe they did do that. I mean,
Highly possible.
it could have been. You wouldn't think that they would gamble that much on a multi-million, maybe billion-dollar franchise, but the television part is rather experimental, so they could do it that way.
Well, I think once again, you kind of, when you look at words or you hear the words from people, a lot of people, a lot of actors and folks choose their words very carefully and very wisely, you know. And so when they say like, okay, well, we do have an end in mind, and this is the end of, and it's like you said at the onset of the show, from a certain point of view, because yes, Mandalorian is ending, but it's birthing Mandalore as the new show. So I mean, yeah, it's semantics or whatnot in some cases. However, I think that it has been planned that way, since the beginning, because I think they always kind of knew like, okay, the greatest story that they wanted to tell. Um, Especially when you started to introduce other main characters like Boba Fett and um Fennec Shan, and now you're introducing Ahsoka back into the mix. So now you're bringing all these different characters, and you almost have to or especially if they're going to be playing in that sandbox, as we talk about, you almost have to kind of like repurpose the show in such a way where it's like, okay, this is kind of showing you the adventures of the Mandalorian as he leads up to Mandalore. If that's, and I'm not saying Mandalore is the name of the new show, so don't quote me on that. But what
Yeah, I
I'm
was gonna
saying is
say,
that's just,
we don't know, but you could say, or whatever they
I'm
call
just,
it. Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just making a spitballing here, but it's just, it could be something that simple, right? So if that be the case, then I can understand the name change, because then now it allows room and space for now all these different assets to come in and then not disrupt the focal point of the show.
Yeah, but and I think that depending on how they do it, once again, first of all, based on the things that we know, and based on some of the things that you said, what I find interesting is, and again, your comments sort of triggered this thought, all those characters were actually introduced in The Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe not Ahsoka, but the point is that live action Ahsoka was introduced in The
Right.
Mandalorian. Fennec
Right.
Shan, introduced in The Mandalorian. Boba Fett reintroduced for television, kind of, in The Mandalorian. Live action.
Cobb Vanth.
Yeah. again, even though he's a character from a novel, live action Cobb Vanth introduced into the Mandalorian. So
Mm-hmm.
even though these people are spinning off into all these other episodes, they could easily come back. And like you said, I mean, if the focus is off of Din, because that's really what it comes down to, is what are you going to do with Din?
Right.
And
Exactly.
and you also have to take some other evidences too, because like you said, Giancarlo Esposito was basically talking about not just the lightsaber duel part, but also he seemed to allude to a season 4. He kept talking about a season, all but
Mm-hmm.
confirming a season 4. So you have to wonder though, is it really season 4 of The Mandalorian, or is it really season 1 of a new show featuring characters from The Mandalorian?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think I'm more inclined to believe that it's going to be the expansion of this world, and I talked about world building, several times on our shows, and we've actually gotten to some, pretty spirited debates about, what's considered world building versus filler episodes and things like that. And I think, once again, I think what Star Wars is trying to do is broaden that landscape and do something that we've, like you said, we've been asking for a long time, which is where you have people coming in and out of different shows and playing their parts, but then they kind of branch back off into their own show, and so it kind of keeps the whole world kind of in a weird kind of orbit, if you will. And so I think that, yeah, in this particular situation, it really wouldn't surprise me if they decide to take the focus off Then, because quite frankly, in most cases, it already kind of has. I mean, in a way, because it's
No,
excuse me.
I know exactly what you mean, man. I mean,
Yeah, because it's like, we kind of start off with this guy, we think we're gonna this gunslinger, he's just gonna be this bounty hunter doing this thing, and then he meets this baby, and
right away,
it's
like
like
the
right
second
out the gate.
episode. Yeah, second
Yeah, and then
episode.
now all of
Boom,
us
focus is off.
is off of him, and now you're introduced something that's greater to him, because and that's the thing, like, okay, everybody, and you even said this when we first saw the Mandalorian, everybody thought it was Boba Fett. Everybody's like, "Oh, cool, getting a Boba Fett story," but then it's like, no, it's not Boba Fett. All right, so now we got this other guy that's just a Mandalorian kind of Boba Fett-ish kind of person. Cool, let's see what he's about. But then you bring in, like I said, it's not just anybody, but you bring in this child that's that looks, a baby form of one of the greatest Star Wars characters of all time. You didn't bring in like some little Ugnaught. You didn't bring in a little Gamorrean. You brought in a whatever species Yoda is, because we still don't know. You brought in that, and you didn't. You knew that was going to just start the buzz. Everybody was going to be talking about, like, "Ooh, a baby Yoda. What's this about?" And then now you got every other episode, he's trying to care for it. The baby is saving him from stuff. He's showing force powers. Already, it's taking away from the Mandalorian. I mean, it's building him, because you're showing his growth as a human being, where he's learning to have to care for something beyond himself, and he's showing compassion. He's showing a lot of different things, and you see the growth in Din as he, matriculates across the galaxy, meeting all these people like Cara Dune and Grief Karga, and the little blue guy. He's he's growing, and you can see he's formed an attachment to Grogu, and then as at the very end of it, you take Grogu away from him, but you don't take him away from him with this, some rather random person. Once again, you top it again with once again another great person that, like, it's like, let's just put Michael Jordan and Shaquille O'Neal like into, it's like you're bringing these two guys into, like, these two great Hall of Famers that have transcended the sport. You're bringing these two guys into the Mandalorian show, a Yoda-like character and Luke Skywalker, and they go off together, and you think that people aren't going to,
Well, okay, but
so
I know, but here's a couple of things that you have to look at. Number one, when you were making a lot of these points, it actually got me thinking about it. And really, what's interesting about Din's character is he's really developed through other people. It's
yes,
Baby Yoda, or
Mm-hmm.
Grogu. It's the droid, right?
Mm-hmm.
IG-11,
Mm-hmm.
because he had this whole thing, so he was sort of getting over that. It's the
Right.
Empire itself, and
Mm-hmm.
Miggs Mayfield was kind of helping bring that part out. You see all these different elements of Din's character being developed, but through
Even Boba
external,
Fett.
even Boba Fett, um, even Grief Karga.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's really in Cara Dune, it's all these people that are around him, right? All these different people are developing his character in a sense. And
Yes.
and so consequently, what I would like to see is maybe now he's standing on his own as a character a little bit if they're going to
Mm.
further the thing, right? Because I think that that's been part of the problem is that, and that's why I don't think that it's weird that they're bringing in your Luke Skywalkers or a little kid that basically is a mirror of, one of the greatest Jedi masters of all time, because you have to look at the Mandalorian as a couple of things. And this is why I always said that it's the perfect vehicle upon which you could start launching and seeding and spinning off other series. And that's because, yes, you're trying to develop this character that you've created upon which the show is supposed to be centered. But at the same time, much like what the Bad Batch is doing, you're also informing the audience of a time period that's been, up until now, relatively uncovered. You
Mm-hmm.
have this direct post Return of the Jedi world, and you have to give people a little bit of a sense of what's going on. Now, I will admit that The Mandalorian, as good of a job as it does, maybe it's not doing as good of a job as the Bad Batch in the whole world building part of it, the informing, because it's a little bit more personal. It's a little bit more enclosed as far as the storyline goes. On the other hand, you're still getting enough and you're still bringing in all these characters, creating new ones, and more or less giving us a picture of this universe.
Well, and I would agree. I would just add that the difference with the Bad Batch and Mandalorian also is time. You have more time because you have more episodes and they're longer to develop
Yeah.
the story. When we're dealing with 20-minute episodes here, 40-minute episodes there, 35-minute episodes, like without there having a set consistency and with more episodes to really delve into a lot of stuff, you know, yeah, it's kind of I don't say it's a mess, but it's kind of like a free for all in a way, where the Bad Batch seems to kind of have a very linear progression
Oh,
in a
yeah.
way.
Well, that's because it still, for the most part, focuses on the Bad Batch. See, what's happening
Mm-hmm.
is you're finding out about everybody else's thing through the eyes of the Bad Batch, whereas in The Mandalorian, and actually, in a way, it's kind of a genius piece of storytelling. You're actually learning about the Mandalorian through everybody else.
Exactly.
I mean, it's
Exactly. Yep.
it's these other people that are more or less, I guess, sparking
Revealing.
or
Yeah.
revealing
And
something about him through, whatever action it is.
oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But here's my question though. If they were going to do something like this, and again, I realize a lot of this stuff is unconfirmed, so don't go jumping in the comments section and I mean, we get it, right? But again,
Right.
there is a lot that's going on here. I mean, there's a lot of talk about this. This isn't just like we got this covered or somebody like that reporting this or Mike Zero on YouTube. I mean, this is stuff that some legitimate places are actually covering. So my question though is, unless this was like some rash decision and they just got this bolt of lightning idea within the last 6 months, why not just make The Mandalorian a limited series? Why not just say, hey guys, it's going to be a limited series. We're going to do 3 seasons. We're going to move on to something else, kind of like a sequel series, maybe.
I don't know. I mean, I guess once again, I think it also comes down to what do they plan to do with season 3. Season 3 is going to be once again that it's got to be that bridge. You know what I'm saying? It's got to be that bridge that's going to take us from the Mandalorian to whatever this new show is, if that's going to be the case.
Hmm.
And I just hope that the events in season 3, you know, align perfectly for that bridge to, you know, be erected. So yeah, I mean, why not say it? I don't know. I think, or say that it's a limited run series. I think people might, you know, feel away or something about it. But I
Yeah,
think
it's
if you
just really
kind of,
weird, man.
yeah, it's a weird move to make. But I'm curious. I'm really curious to see why they did it, and I'm hoping, like, you know, maybe, you know, how we got like a lot of information after season 2 with the gallery. You know, I'm hoping we could do that same thing at the end of season 3, because, you know, I'm sure they're gonna be like, okay, you know, now we're transitioning from here, or maybe we'll be able to see it ourselves. Like, oh, okay, I see what's happening here. I see why they're doing it. Because remember, we get Book of Boba Fett first, so
Well,
we're
all
gonna
right.
get Book of Boba Fett this year, and then Mandalorian is gonna come right behind it. So it's like, okay, maybe between the two of those, we can kind of start
Yeah.
understanding. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, we're saying all this stuff before we even have any of these things, right? We definitely need the Book of Boba Fett. We need the Mandalorian season 3. We need these things in order to maybe get a better feel for where all this stuff is going. But I just find it really weird that they're saying all this stuff now. And to be honest, it worries me a little bit because up until now, I've gone, you know what, Filoni and Favreau, they totally know what they're doing. We have nothing to worry about. Look at the way everything is going. Unless they come out and say, hey, this is what we had been planning all along, we just didn't want to reveal it, that would
Mm-hmm.
make sense. But other than that, though, it's like if they're starting to play around too much with different stuff. And again, I mean, the
Yeah.
director, who was it? Was it Robert Rodriguez? Is he the one that directed Book of Boba Fett?
Yeah.
I'm pretty
Yep.
sure it was him. And he came out and he was basically saying, "Oh yeah, man, this is going to over deliver." I mean, he's really, really confident in what he's been able to do with this new series.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that the Book of Boba Fett is going into a season 2 is also a little strange too, because that started out to be a limited series. So now it almost makes me wonder, are they flip-flopping everything? You
Well, it
know,
is, once again, it makes you wonder what is, like we said before, what determines limited series. You know what I mean? Because limited series could be 3 seasons, it could be 5. You know, I've always said anything under 5 is probably a limited series. Um,
I'd go
but
along with that. I'd go
you
along with
know,
that,
but
but the other way that you could look at it too is maybe a limited series means that, see, limited versus open-ended. And I think that limited series just means that you have a finite amount of seasons in mind at first.
hmm
You
right.
could almost say Cobra Kai is a limited series. Oh, Ronaldo joins us, by the way. He says, hello, Mandalorian Warriors.
What's going on, sir?
How's it going? Good to have you. But that's what I'm saying. You could almost say that, you know, Cobra Kai is a limited series because they have a beginning and end. Now, in a way, they're violating that a little bit because they're saying that we have a story arc. We could tell it in 3 seasons if we have to. We could tell it in 6 seasons if we're allowed to go that long.
hmm
But that's what they want to do. So you could say that a limited series just means that they have a story arc. They know basically how many seasons they want to go versus the opposite, which would be open ended. They just keep making seasons until they just don't
No
have
longer
any more
renewed.
story. Yeah. Either they're no longer,
Yeah.
either they're canceled by the network or whatever, or they just decide, okay, this one's going to be the last one.
Yeah. I mean, it is a bit of a conundrum, you know, trying to figure out where they're really going with it. I think that, um, you know, we have to kind of see the overall vision of what this new Star Wars television, and like you said, you know, just moments ago, was that, you know, television is new for Star Wars. You know, we haven't seen this before, and so I can see them, you know, trying to create their own system, their own style, because like you said, Star Wars for the most part lives within the films. You know, yes, you got comics and books and things like that, but primarily most people digest Star Wars in the theater. And so now that it's coming to the small screen or to television, you know, now you have to look at things like, okay, well, how do we market this? How do we keep people engaged? You know, and it's like I said, some things you can borrow from Marvel, you know, where it's like, all right, you know, we can connect all these stories together and make it one big huge story, and you're just seeing what's going on this particular side, but then on the other side, you know, we can show you what's going on over here, almost like a choose your own adventure type thing. And so, but you're still getting a blend and a mix, and you know, because you might be a fan of the Ahsoka series, but then you know, Dan might pop up in that series. He's like, man, who's this Mandalorian dude? Like, he's really cool. Like, let's say you've never seen the Mandalorian before, and you just kind of popped in because you heard Ahsoka was having a show. Oh, okay, this Mandalorian dude is kind of sweet. You know, I wish they had more of them. Well, you do. Now you can see you can watch the old Mandalorian episodes, and you can also catch them on Mandalore, which is the new episode. I mean, I'm not saying that's once again.
I know
For
you
everybody
keep saying
joining.
that, but you you keep. I mean, to you, that's the new name.
I know, right?
It's almost like you have
But
to say it and then say, "I'm not saying that's the new name of the show," but I mean, but you got to remember though that Star Wars is no stranger to television in the form of animation. It's live
true,
action where,
right?
and they
That's
have to
that's
play
true.
with this a little bit. You know, they got to maybe sort of make new rules for this and experiment a little bit. But
Yeah.
the problem with the experimentation that I see is the fact that right now people are considering Star Wars more of a success on television. It's like, oh, look, with the Mandalorian, with some of this other stuff, they're actually getting it right. So now they're putting more faith anyway into
Mm-hmm.
the live action television, and a lot of people are saying, "Hey, this is the future of Star Wars now." and,
Mm-hmm.
and so where they should technically be able to have room to experiment a little bit, where, hey, Star Wars is really the films, right? So this little television universe that we're doing, we can play around with it a little bit more. But that's increasingly becoming untrue though, because now if they start dropping the ball on the live action television, I think that more than anything, because everybody now is used to the films maybe not doing what they want.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, The Mandalorian is almost kind of like the original trilogy in a way. A lot of people are really liking it, think, hey, this is the future of Star Wars, this is it, whatever. And they're doing a good job. And I think that with, you know, them saying that the Book of Boba Fett now is going to exceed a bunch of expectations. And look, we have a feeling that Ahsoka's going to, Andor's
Mm-hmm.
going to. I think it's safe to say that Obi-Wan will
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Yep.
And I think that once you see more of these shows coming out, I think that that's going to, more than anything, start to give The Mandalorian a little bit more flexibility. Now, whether or not this is truly the last season before they change the name, and maybe they keep it the same show, but it's a different chapter. So maybe, well, even though they already call these things chapters, what if The Mandalorian was the first half, and now we'll just call it Mandalore since you've been saying it the whole show? Maybe Mandalore is seasons 4 through 8, and then they change it to something else for seasons 9 through, you know what I mean? I mean, they can do anything that they want.
Yeah.
All right, let me get to this one chat from Ronaldo here. He says, if Star Wars changed to being more on the television side rather than the film side, what would your reaction be? He goes on to say, I think that Star Wars is great on TV, but its natural environment is on the big screen. I think switching to television would end some of the magic. Well, I can tell you from my perspective, and remember, I was the first generation of this, I wouldn't necessarily mind if it switched to only television. And the reason why I say that is because television now is not like television used to be. I mean, television now is like movies broken up into a bunch of parts. When I'm watching The Mandalorian, I don't feel like I'm watching a TV show. I feel like I'm watching a little chunk of a film. But yeah, I do agree though that, the whole experience of going to the movies and seeing Star Wars and that logo and that big fanfare blast, and then you see the opening crawl. But the thing is, if they get away from the whole saga, who knows? But at the same time, it is true. Nothing can really take the place of experiencing Star Wars on the big screen with the really crazy sound system and just that vibe of everybody being in the theater and being all excited and the electricity that's in the air. I mean, I would agree. It is irreplaceable.
Yeah, I want to, completely echo everything you said, for that, because yeah, I think I would. I mean, I love the fact that Star Wars is on television because now, like, I can still get my fix of Star Wars without having to wait, years. Because like you said, being the first generation, all right, you saw, A New Hope in '77, then you had to wait, all this time before you got to Empire. But now, we're having insurmountable amount of content where it's like, okay, well, now I can watch all these TV shows. Now you have all these films that are coming in between stuff because you might have Rogue Squadron. Because remember, like Rogue One, that was the first one that was actually like not a saga film.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you saw the success of that, you saw, even though from a certain point of view, people didn't think Solo was successful, although it was, you know, okay, that was a great, a great ride. And it's cool to be able to tell those stories without having to really like to really adhere to the saga framework. But like I said, the movie going experience, like you said, absolutely. There's nothing like, okay, you and I joke about this all the time, Eric, about how like, man, like when we worked together at the studio, and I was like, yep, I got midnight show tickets, and it's like, yeah, like that type of energy. It's like, oh man, we're gonna stay up, we're gonna go to the show, gonna grab some popcorn, some nachos or something, and sit down and watch a 2-hour Star Wars movie, and we have no clue we kind of have an idea what we're gonna see, but we don't. And then you got to leave the theater and you kind of get to talk about it, and it's now you got to go see it a bunch of times. I mean, yeah,
that's
it's that magic. It's an experience, and you don't get that when you're watching The Mandalorian on TV. It's really cool, and we talk about it, of course, like on our reviews, and so we are excited about it. But it's nothing like seeing it in the theater.
Well, and it is a different. I mean, it's a different format. It's a different presentation. Because it's like you pointed out, right? You go see one of the films, and then even during the Disney era, it's like you see a movie that's 2.5 hours, and now you got to wait a year to see another one. Whereas with the TV shows, I'm basically seeing a 30, 45-minute thing every week. Now, granted, and every week for, 8 or 9 weeks. And the more that Star Wars is on television, so the more series from which we have to choose, now you're going to get even more content. Now, what I will say, though, is what I like about this whole TV universe, besides the fact that they can actually get more in depth, because instead of a 2-hour movie, you're really doing an 8-hour movie broken up into, like 10 parts
30.
or something, right? Or whatever it is, or maybe a 5-hour movie broken up into 8 parts, or, depending on what it is. But the thing is, you can actually tell more of the story. And now, in a lot of ways, Star Wars in live action can mirror a lot of what we used to get in comic books or the novels. I mean, I could say right now that I finished Light of the Jedi, which was just an absolutely amazing book. Highly recommended. I was kind of into it, but because it's during the High Republic era and it's kind of like your first High Republic novel, you're still trying to get your bearings a little bit. But once you get into it, it's amazing. And now I'm like maybe a couple hundred pages in Into the Dark, which of course that one's more special because that's a Claudia Gray one.
Hmm.
And then of course there's the comic books where you take a character like say Kira from Solo and you're putting her now into the post Empire Strikes Back universe. And it's this whole really cool story arc that's going on. So what you could do in television is you can actually take a lot of these things and you can explore them more in depth and you could tell more stories and you could tell deeper stories than just doing a film every year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the cool medium of television is, like you said, being able to kind of make it almost like how we what is it, the 40s and the 30s when they had the serial series in the theaters. That's kind of what it reminds me of, but just now, because that's before you had television sets,
Well, and that's
of
what
course, in home. So
Lucas
that's kind of
based it all on.
yeah, exactly.
That's what
So
Star Wars is, right?
right. And so that's what I love the television, and like I said, because television looks so close to film now.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is it's like you can't almost differentiate between the two. But I think it's Star Wars still needs to make the movies, because I think it allows for that type of family time, if uninterrupted family time. You go grab the family, we're going to sit down, watch some Star Wars for like 2.5 hours, versus, all right, you're watching it in your basement or what have you, and everybody's, running around, the phones ringing and all that stuff. It just creates a different vibe. But I think that if we're going to, and we probably should do this, I would love to, like, actually, like, when enough of these get out, I want to see, like, rank, like, these TV series, like which ones, like, okay, Obi-Wan, Andor, uh Mandalorian, the live action ones. I would love to see this, like, how, like, they kind of, how they're structured, how they compare to one another. I would just love to do something like this, or maybe we have to say that for a later time. But I think that the TV universe has its own, and it's kind of no different, like I said, than Marvel. Marvel has its own TV universe. You got Agents of Shield, you got Loki now, you've got Winter Soldier and Falcon, you got all these different things. But then, like, people still want to go see an Avengers movie in the theater. People still want to go see a new Iron Man or whatever the case may be. So yeah,
Well,
I'm for both, but
yeah, and it's like you said. I mean, you can't replace the magic, the experience, any of that stuff. The way that I would do it if I were the head of Disney or Lucasfilm is I would basically tell the big macro stories theatrically as
right.
films. And then what you
Hmm.
could do is you could see very much the same way that The Mandalorian becomes sort of the anchor point, and then other shows are seeded out from that, or maybe other characters. You could do the same thing with any of the films. You can have a trilogy of films or maybe just a single one, and then from there maybe you do a series on it, or maybe you do kind of like what they do with the comics. They expand the storyline. They're still expanding the storyline of the original trilogy.
Hmm.
So
That's the foundation. Yeah, definitely.
so there's no reason why they couldn't continue both. Now, the reason why I partially answered that question the way I did too was because Ronaldo was basically saying if they concentrated more, not solely on television, but more on television. And if they did concentrate more on television, as I'll say it like this, as long as they were making films, as long as we were getting theatrical releases for Star Wars, I would be okay if they put their focus on television because you could tell more stories. You can get more in depth. And as we pointed out, there's really not much of a differentiation between the quality and the look of the television shows versus the movies. I mean, you can tell the budget's a little bit less, but you could definitely tell the theatrical films versus a television series. But I mean, to be fair, that gap is narrowing every passing year.
Yeah. Um, I wouldn't be okay with them putting more attention into the to the series. And I think the reason why we care so much now is because we're dealing with characters we already kind of familiar with, so we're kind of hyped about that. But I mean, I think once those stories are no longer being told, and I think you got spinoffs and spinoffs and spinoffs. Not saying that it wouldn't have the same interest, but I think once again, I think just traditionally, I think Star Wars. I think when Disney purchased the property, I think they intended to make like the films, like we said, that's what makes Star Wars. It's the films. And I think if you got great films, and yeah, like you said, you tell a macro story, and then now you deal with, all right, let's just say we deal with the saga trilogy. I mean, the sequel saga. All right, Poe Dameron gets his own show. Ray gets her own show. You know, Finn gets his own show or something like that. Like, okay, that's cool because we know they're going to come back in the big movies and be together, so we
Well,
can kind of
maybe,
see their adventures that way.
maybe you could just as easily as just make a movie off of Din too, right? It becomes the
Hmm.
reverse. I mean, the reason why I say you don't necessarily need the movies is they got the entire High Republic era, and they're starting that out in novels and comics.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, like, even though you have that, I think that would be better established in a film, and then you bring it into, if you want to,
Well, it
branch off into
depends.
the TV series.
Actually, I can see why they did it the way they did it, especially considering now that I've been reading enough of the stuff, right? I've caught up. Well, issue 9 of the High Republic came out. I gotta read that. But I've read a couple of the novels. I have a better feel now for the High Republic than I did when I just read a few of the comic issues when we were reviewing them. And that there's so much to introduce that in order to do an effective job in a short amount of time, they had to do it in this medium because you can release books and comics quickly, a little bit.
Yeah.
The only other way, and I think we actually brought this up, and I think what we had said was they should have done it in a television series because that gives them the best of both worlds.
Well, see, to me, and I think honestly, if you really wanted to, and to your point, I think the best thing would have been an animated series. See, if you
Yeah.
told the High Republic in an animated series, oh, totally, I'm all about that. Because see, the cool thing is that, and what we're seeing with the Mandalorian, right? You get some cool character like Cara Dune, who, like, all right, now she goes off and does something crazy on Twitter. Now you can't use her anymore because or whatever. It alters everything. But see, if you have, an animated series or something like that, just get a voice actor. You see what I'm saying? Like, you don't need the likeness of someone. You just get a voice actor to do it and keep it going. People won't take it as seriously, but when you start putting like people's actual personalities, in films and things like that, I think it changes things. But and that's why I feel like if you do a movie, okay, cool. She does a movie, or he or she does a movie, and it's less time commitment too. It frees up a lot of other actors, to do things like that, because that's the other problem too. Sometimes that you have, even if you have contractually to do, like, let's say 3 movies, okay, you got 3 movies. There's an end to that, but sometimes with these series, unless it's a limited run where you all right, we're doing this for 2 or 3 seasons and then we're done. Yeah, you may be able to get out of that too. That's just like the theaters. But what happens if you do have a series that you want to do 8, 9, 10, 11, now this actor is tied up doing this stuff where,
Well, even in the movies, it's like that. Robert Downey Jr. had been tied up from like 2007. Well, that was when the movie came out. So probably like 2006 all the
6,
way to
yeah,
last year, I mean,
right. And he spent like 20 years like doing Iron Man, basically. Yeah, I know. And that's what I'm saying. Like, but that's
well,
kind of a rare thing, just because you have all these entities that play into that, because you got like the Iron Man series of movies, and then you got the Avengers series. That's its own thing. So yeah, that's going to take up a lot of time. But if you got like, like I said, a 1 movie deal, like I said, like a solo movie or a Rogue One,
Yeah, but when you were
It's like, all
talking about
right.
the High Republic, see, because of the nature of the way that it is and a lot of the adventures they go on, it'd be better if it was done in animation because they could draw it. They can,
Hmm.
voice acting doesn't take as long, like you said, as real acting. More so, though, it's just where the story I think would function best.
And you could actually show them maybe doing things a little bit.
Well, like more fantastical, you can.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can, you know, and I also feel like it allows you uh to have more freedom of movement because, like you said, in a 2 hour, 2.5 hour movie, that's all you got. But like some of these, like these comics, they go on for quite a while.
Books
So
too.
it's like, yeah, in the books too. Yeah, exactly. So I think in the TV series, like an animated series, it gives you the cartoon, like the comic, but you also can flesh out the story longer, like a book.
Yeah, and the
And I
other
think
thing
that's
too,
that's
a lot of these animated series now, I mean, you I mean, it doesn't even look like
that.
animation anymore. It looks like, I mean, you
Yeah.
totally just think that you're watching a movie after a while.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I've seen to watch like a lot of the Batman and Superman stuff, like now the graphic novel like animations. Yeah, you're totally into that more than like some movie, and it's like cool. I can see these characters being, the super powerful guys that you see, whereas you're kind of limited sometimes, with the films.
Yeah, whether it be either the technology or maybe not even so much that, but financially.
Hmm.
Ronaldo says, I don't think this is going to happen, but what if, let's say, the stories that were going to be told in episodes 10, 11, and 12 were told as TV series instead of films? I think that the stories classified as episodes should be exclusively movies. Yeah, although I will say this, I had often thought that if they were going to reboot the original trilogy, they should do it as a TV series. And I say that because you can then get your more modern and you can fix a lot of the plot holes and do that stuff. But now the movies are untouched, right? Those are still the films. If you do it
Mm,
in kind of a limited television thing, it can exist in a different universe. But
gotcha.
as far as continuing, I mean, they could, but again, if they're true saga films, which that's what the episodic ones are, they're part of the saga. They should probably stay movies, I think, because it would be
Yeah,
too weird.
definitely.
I mean,
Yeah, it's
unless the only exception I would make to that is if we didn't know that's what it was. I mean, if you're going to do it, then just don't tell us it's 10, 11, and 12.
yeah, that kind of almost like in a way kind of defeats the point, But I think if it's going to be episodic, yes, those definitely need to stay in the theaters. Um, but yeah, like I want to see, I'm really curious to see this whole Rogue Squadron movie. Honestly, like
Yeah, I know.
I really want to see this thing because
Well,
it's
and then
like to me, it combines two of my favorite things. It's like Star Wars and like Top Gun. It's almost like, which unfortunately is getting pushed back yet again. But we won't go into that.
it just makes me so mad.
Oh,
It's like
angry, I
every
know.
single. I mean, the thing is, it's like they always wait until we're literally like maybe 6 to 8 weeks before the release, and I could really get hyped up, and then they push it
Hmm.
again. It's like,
Eventually, we're not going to care anymore. It's like, yeah, whatever.
or at least believe it,
Yep.
And it's just like, guys, this whole situation's not going to get any better. I mean, just release a
Or if
stupid thing.
or if it comes out and it's not even that good, we like really like we had to wait all this time for this.
uh, they did the same thing with Mission Impossible 7. So hopefully, but I will say that this whole thing right here actually kind of segues into a little preview of what we're going to be talking about Friday.
Mm.
Because Friday's whole topic is going to be about the fact that some people have actually been saying some stuff behind closed doors. Now, again, this could be, I'm sure it's rumor. You have to classify this as rumor. But it looks like Lucasfilm might be toying with the idea once again now of releasing 2 movies per year. So we're going to
Hmm.
talk about the whole viability of it. Is it a good idea? Some of the facts that surround this rumor, like what people are saying and where this fits in. And then, of course, we'll chat with you guys and get your thoughts on it as well. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just think with the whole wrapping up this whole Mandalorian name change thing, I mean, if it would really depend, and I hate to keep wimping out by saying it like this, but it really, once again, depends on the Book of Boba Fett and the Mandalorian season 3. And it's like, we could sit there and say how stupid it is, or how it might not be a good idea marketing wise or any of this stuff. But the fact is, we don't have all the variables. We don't know everything that they know. Now, I will say again, I'll reiterate this, that if they were thinking along those lines anyway, they should have just called The Mandalorian a limited series and then say there's a sequel series and just do it that way. But I don't know. What are your final thoughts on this?
Yeah, my final, take on the whole thing is, I feel like if you're going to do a name change, just make sure that it makes sense for that to happen. Like I said, I personally feel like, okay, if the events of season 3 kind of lend itself to like, okay, we're no longer focusing on Din Djarin, the Mandalorian, but we're focusing on now the grander scope of whatever this thing is. I'm not going to use that term anymore, that title, but whatever that is, then cool. Then call it, whatever you need to call it for it to fit that particular mode. And yeah, I mean, I'm okay with that, but just make it make sense. And that's always been my thing. It's just anything with Star Wars, it's just make it make sense, people. Like, don't really think about how this is going to affect the whole entire landscape of what you're doing here. And I think the fans will always be on board once we know that that's happening. And so far, it's been in good hands. We can't complain. There's been some great content that's come out. We've gotten 2 great seasons of Mandalorian. We've got some great books. You finished, the whole Thrawn trilogy. You've now into the High Republic stuff. That's been great. So we're moving in the right direction. I just want us to not try to do too much too soon, and just make sure we're just making it make sense. And that's it for me.
Ronaldo thinks that Mandalore is a cool title, actually.
Thank you.
And yeah, and again, I mean, once I clear out the second High Republic book, I'll probably then switch to the second book in the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy that came out, because the first one was phenomenal. And then once I finish that one, I'll probably wipe out the whole Queen's Shadow, Queen's Peril, all those books, because I have them. And then maybe I'll take it from there, because by then I think November is when the final book of the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy comes out. So there's a lot of reading to do. Of course, I want to get some more High Republic stuff in there. But yeah, as far as the Mandalorian goes, it's like you said, just make it make sense. You want to trust Filoni and Favreau that they know what they're doing, that they're not going to do anything stupid. They're keeping the fans pretty much in mind whenever they make these decisions. So I got to trust them, and I just got to think we're probably in good hands. But the most important question is, what do you guys think?
Yes.
So, we've had a little bit of chatting here. We know what's going on as far as our live chat. But for you guys that are watching the rebroadcast of this, what do you think? Leave your comment in the comment section below. And of course, while you're there, don't forget to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell so you know when we're going to have new content. And remember, we're going to be back this Friday at 8, where we're going to be talking about the possibility of Lucasfilm releasing 2 Star Wars films per year. So that should be a really good spirited discussion, I think.
Definitely.
All right, so until then, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.